Most high performers don't have a motivation problem. They have a systems problem. They're successful in their careers, but their health, energy, and longevity are paying the price behind the scenes. Welcome to the Practice Pulse, where we break down how founders and practitioners are building smarter systems, creating real impact, and scaling in a way that actually works. I'm your host, Nancy Margrit, founder of Optima Pro AI, where we help healthcare, wellness, and longevity businesses grow through practical AI systems and operational clarity while retaining the human touch. Today, I'm joined by Jen Cates, founder of Shift Human Performance. Jen brings a really unique perspective to the space. She spent over a decade in biotech research, working closely with FDA-regulated environments, traveling constantly, and operating at a very, very high level while simultaneously seeing firsthand the patterns showing up in patient data and in her own health. What's really interesting is the strategic pivot that Jen made, moving back into serving high-performing professionals who are overwhelmed, overextended, and looking for a more sustainable way to operate. Jen, I'm so excited to dive into things with you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Nancy. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Okay, so let's start out with your background because it's such a key part of your perspective. You spent over a decade in biotech. You were traveling constantly, working in high pressure environments. And at the same time, you were seeing patterns in patient data and experiencing some of those same challenges yourself. So what were the biggest patterns you were noticing, both in the data and in your own life, that made you realize that something needed to change?
That's such a good question and such a sobering question at that.
Right?
So, literally, after going through thousands of patient charts over the years, as well as my own health, a lot of the patterns that I would see were lifestyle patterns. We're talking high blood pressure, high cholesterol, joint issues, joint aches and pains, which of course are relative. Everything's relative, right? And depending on the actual individual themselves. But generally speaking, a lot of these things were just lifestyle things that could be avoided sometimes, most of the time, with some intention. And I know for me, it was high blood pressure. And that is what I experienced, especially traveling often, even though I loved traveling and have traveled far and wide in that career, it still catches up to you. The reduced sleep, insomnia, that was another one that I would see very frequently in the patient charts over the years, as well as for me. And all of that adds up. It does compound and snowball into other health issues that are fortunately avoidable and manageable if you implement certain strategies along.
So true, because we are our own little ecosystem. So when one thing is off, such as sleep, which I feel like is so important, it just
Foundational.
compounds and snowballs, like you said, because it's affecting all of the other parts and they all just work together. And if you throw something out of whack, then everything's going to be thrown off. So, and
Yeah,
it's interesting.
the
Go
human
ahead.
body, sorry to interrupt, but the human body is just not siloed. It's not as siloed as we think it might be. And we think that, okay, great, sleep is just its own thing. I just need to work on that without really realizing that sleep is what is impacting your high blood pressure, is what is impacting that elevated anxiety that you might be experiencing before bed, because it's kind of it's a circular thing. If you're not sleeping, then you're anxious about not sleeping and you're frustrated about not sleeping, and then that feeds into one another's. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And that stress is interesting because a lot of high performance careers, they normalize stress and health trade-offs as just part of the job, which is great that you're stepping in and taking a different approach. So when you think about how you want to serve these high achieving professionals, what are they typically struggling with that they don't always recognize as a problem yet?
Well, the first thing is clarity and just having that clear picture of what they should be focusing on. And it's not necessarily the supplements or the 1 to 5% game changers. It's the large picture things. It is the sleep. It is the managing a balanced nutrition, balanced meals throughout your day to keep that energy pretty steady throughout the day, because afternoon crashes can happen, especially when you're a high achieving individual and you have the pressure on, and maybe your day is filled with meetings that you might find pointless, but that's a whole other topic. And that clarity is what can bring so much. I don't know how to explain it, but it can bring so much value to someone who is striving so strongly in their career and in their life, especially if they're a parent and they have all of these spinning plates that are happening at the same time. But I think on top of clarity, I think it's just a matter of really getting clear on managing their life overall. So sure, they might have or strive to have clarity around nutrition and sleep hygiene and things like that. But also, how are they regulating themselves? How are they regulating their nervous system? How are they managing that stress that they are feeling? Because we're never going to be fully regulated all of the time. I just want to go ahead and say that because I've heard and I've seen nervous system regulation thrown around endlessly, especially on social media and the interwebs. But I'm here to say that you're not supposed to be in a regulated state, Zen-like state all of the time. It is an action, it's a verb. Regulation happens in ebbs and flows. The key is that whenever you're peaking and you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, you're able to get back into that baseline that is a baseline for you. So I think that that's a big one that I see often with the folks that I work with, especially high achieving, career driven folks. But yeah, clarity, and then just getting really clear on how they can manage those certain aspects of their life without feeling.
No, it's a great point you bring up because I think I struggle with that sometimes, the stress of being stressed. Like you're like, I don't want to be
Yes.
stressed right now because I know how bad
Mhm.
it is for me. So it's like it compounds. So
Yeah.
giving yourself permission to it's okay to feel stressed, but what are we going to do to get through this kind of thing is really great. So I love your perspective on that.
Yeah. Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah, so you originally built your business with corporate wellness in mind, and then you shifted into a more niche audience. And now you're kind of
Did.
coming back to that original vision. So I bring this up because I loved our intro call because you were like all sweaty and you like had just gotten off of a bike and you were like, all right, let's talk about podcasts. So tell me about like kind of what was the driving pivot right now to make you like make this the right move to go back to that original just niche with corporate wellness in mind?
I'm so glad you asked because when I did make the pivot to working with cyclists and endurance athletes back in 2020, 2021, when a lot was happening in that realm, um, I felt excited about going into that niche because I am passionate about cycling, right? But even when I made that pivot, I just felt like, oh, is this in alignment actually with what I left corporate to do? Because I had lived that overworked, overstressed, underregulated lifestyle for so many years, especially the last few years of my career, that it was so paramount to me to start my business with that in mind of thinking about mindfulness and incorporating mindful practices with my clients and breath work, if they're open to breath work, if it works for them, but other modalities and regulating their nervous system before it was like a niche term. That when I did make the shift into cycling, I was excited, but then I was also like, I'm still going to incorporate those things. I'm still going to
Mhm.
incorporate mindfulness and like nervous system regulation, stress management, sleep, all of that, right? But I didn't make that necessarily the focus. And it's been over the past 2 years, I've really felt the call only because I've seen it mirror in myself, even as a coach. So I'm out of corporate and I have my own business, but the wonders of having your own business is, hey, nervous system regulation is a very serious thing because
Mhm.
having your own business, depending on yourself for your income and, being able to feed yourself and pay your mortgage, that is a whole other stress in and of itself, right? And I'm sure you can relate, Nancy.
Yeah.
So just being realistic with myself. And then also along those years, working with cyclists, working with endurance athletes, seeing them go through the same exact thing with the nervous system regulation and the stress management and the overwhelm and them forgetting their core values or not even knowing their core values and all of the things that I just could no longer ignore the need to go back to the roots and follow those roots and focus my efforts on that. And that, like, even just thinking about it and making that switch, even just thinking about making that switch rather excited me. And to
Mhm.
me, that was a green light. Like I've had nothing but green lights along the way with going back to the niche that I originally went into because I want to help folks that are in that situation that I was in because not a lot of coaches out there have lived the corporate lifestyle, especially traveling as much as I did on a weekly basis and internationally and then can go into the coaching realm and coach folks from the ground up and actually know truly what it's like to travel weekly and not just like travel for vacation, because that's what a lot of coaches are familiar with is like,
Right.
yeah, I know how to travel to, Bali and Hawaii and like, yeah, that's and I'm like, oh no, girlfriend, that is a completely different stressor. Like you do not understand the need to survive on 5 hours of sleep because your flight was 6 hours delayed and you had a snowstorm that you had to navigate once you landed in Boston because it's always Boston. And I could go on, right? Just
Right.
because that's a lived experience that I've lived. And I would love to help folks who are living that see the clarity and see what they can do for themselves.
I love that. Yeah. It's beautiful when you get all those green lights, like you were saying, and you're like, "This is the right direction. This is where I want to be going. This is where I can make the most impact in others' lives." So that's wonderful when you can feel that as a coach. So when someone does come to you today, especially now that you've got this new direction, what makes your approach different from typical fitness or health coaching that they may have already tried?
Well, just other than the fact that I've been in the trenches in the corporate world and traveling endlessly, like I mentioned, I do truly know firsthand what it's like to travel and for work on a weekly basis. But also, my approach is like velvet gloves type of approach where I am curious. I get really curious with my clients and ask a lot of questions because sure, they can tell me things, during their check-ins and during our conversations that are impacting them, but I want to go a layer deeper. I want to really get to the core of things. And I don't shy away from that, which, it's a strength of mine to ask further questions and to go deeper. And I
Mhm.
think that that's really important with a coach client relationship. It helps us get to know one another, sure, but then it also helps us get clarity that can serve my clients that much better. So, that's the difference is I'm just endlessly curious about my clients and I don't shy away. I'm not scared to explore the roots of everything if they're open to explore the roots of everything.
Right, and you have the knowledge base to really help them once you dive in there and understand those things. You have that experience, so that's awesome. One thing that stood out to me from our conversation in our intro call is that you're not just focused on physical performance, but you're really looking at the entire system of an individual. Can you kind of walk us through how you approach a client holistically?
For sure. I mean, during the intake form process, when my clients do come in, they complete the intake form. It gives me a lot of clarity around where they are, and it helps me also triage what to focus on first. During that, there is a lot of clarity that I get. And there's a lot of questions that I ask about, of course, their sleep. What do they do for a living? How do they spend most of their day? And what that looks like with family life, work life, personal life. And then how much they're sitting, how much they're moving in their day to day basis. What do their workouts look like? What do their meals look like? And it really helps to plan and see them as a person. And then I do go deeper and ask questions like, hey, what are ways you seek encouragement? What does motivation look and feel like to you? What's your love language? If they know, because those questions do help me interact with them better and find the words that I can communicate with them better. But I look at them as a whole person. I acknowledge what they do on a day to day basis because you are not just a human living in this life and going through day to day. You have, like I said earlier, a lot of plates spinning. You have family life potentially. You have animals and dogs and cats and things like that that also depend on you. Maybe you're also going to school while working full time, and that's a lot. Or maybe you're a stay at home parent and you're going to school, or whatever it looks like for you. We can't negate what you do outside of, just the eating and sleeping and walking in a daily basis, right? And then also, what are you passionate about? Because I want to know what folks are really passionate about in their lives. What are their hobbies? How do they fill their time? Because this helps me just understand them more from a personality lens, sure, but then also, hey, what can serve them best? And what are some things that we can change, just little dial movers that we can change that help them show up in their life a little bit better or whatever their goals are. But holistically, we are looking at those silos, sure. I don't even want to call them silos just because they are interconnected, but we are looking at Their physical health, sure, but mental health and spirituality, belief system, family life, work life, their identity, and all of those things, they're so beautiful and they blend to make them the human that they are. So we can't negate one thing for another. They're all really interconnected, and you just have to learn how to kind of connect the dots, which takes some practice as a coach. But I like to look at them as a whole person as much as I possibly can throughout the entire process.
Yeah, that's so important. I think, yeah, the way you take an approach holistically is one of the core things that I love about your program, being able to do that. Another thing that I also love, you kind of mentioned in our intro call, a lot of programs are either they're kind of extreme, they go overly rigid. And you mentioned something important about avoiding that pendulum swing. How do you help
Yes, yeah.
clients kind of find that middle ground where it's sustainable, especially for people with demanding careers?
It's a practice. It definitely says it requires experimentation. And that is actually something that I 100% of the time say during my discovery calls with potential clients is, are you open to experimenting? Are you open to exploring things to see if they work for you? Because sure, they can be backed by all of the research in the world and science can support that. And, the current body of research can support this idea, right? But if you're not a person who wants to meditate, or if you're unable to do breath work because you have really bad asthma or you have vocal cord dysfunction like I do. So breath work at first can be very triggering. And a lot of breath work practitioners don't recognize this and acknowledge that breath work can actually be triggering for some folks. I'm not going to force that on them. So first things first, I always lay the ground rule that like, hey, we're experimenting. We're exploring what could potentially work best for you. And you just have to be open to it. Are you open to it? And 100% people are like, yes, I will. Because at this point, they want to try things because they think that they've tried everything. And unfortunately, they haven't tried everything in this type of lens that isn't rigid. But yeah, the pendulum, what I see often before folks come to me is they've tried the extremes. They've tried nothing against these things that I'm going to bring up, of course, but
Right.
they've tried keto, they've tried Whole30, they've tried whole foods and eating clean, whatever that means. And, you know, and I say that because I used to say eating clean years ago. So, please know, like, but your food's clean. It's fine. But it's the all or nothing pendulum swings of like, I'm going to eliminate all of these things instead of thinking, hey, what can I add? Maybe I just need to add a certain vegetable or a certain set of vegetables that make me feel better and not force me to eat chicken and broccoli, for example. Maybe I need to focus on just getting 7 hours of sleep instead of eight, because eight is just not freaking happening when I'm at six right now. Let's focus on 6.5 hours. See what I'm saying? So they think that they have to really do these dramatic shifts when in reality, they just have to do these tiny little, like gentle shifts along the way. And these tiny dial movers, right, are what can actually make huge differences when they're breaking away from the all or nothing extreme pendulum swing and kind of trying to settle back into that middle. But you have to find the edges first. What does their schedule allow? What about their responsibilities in life? We have to explore those things because that is what's going to give us the framework that they can work within instead of forcing them to fit something or like what do I like to say? Like force a square peg into a round hole type of
Mhm.
situation. We're not forcing here. We're easing. Okay. And that's where, yeah, as long as they're open to exploring things, great. More power to them.
No, I think that's great, and I love your analogy of the pendulum swinging because I think most high achievers can identify with that very easily because we are trying to achieve at such a high level. So we seek out these extreme programs that are really going to help us take it all the way, right? And then, but you have that swing back where it's like, oh, fell off the wagon, just ate a
Yeah.
pizza, like whatever you
Yeah.
know what I mean? So
Or
being able,
75 hard.
oh,
Let's
yeah,
do 75 medium. How about that? Like, I'm all about
yeah,
75 medium or 75 middle, or I don't
yeah.
want to say 75 soft, but
I'm
like I think
gonna go, like
75 medium.
maybe 75 schmedium, like, we're right, like, schmedium, you know? Yeah.
I'm down with the schmedium. I'm
Let's
down
do
with the
75
schmedium.
schmedium.
Yeah. And again, nothing against these programs because
Right.
I do recognize that they do motivate certain folks. And sometimes like just a handful of folks need that intensity
Hmm.
and that massive restriction. But if you do those massive restrictive moments and programs, you need to examine how you actually respond after the program ends. If you go back to what you were doing, then it didn't work. There is something that is missing. There is a gap that needs to be filled. And that program is not necessarily what is going to fill it for you. So that's where the pendulum, I get so passionate about this, Nancy, if you can't tell. But this is where like the passion, it serves my purpose, right? And it fuels me because I see it and I see the frustration in folks who come to me after trying all the things. And I just want them to find that middle road,
Yeah.
that 75 schmedium.
We should start a program together.
I like this. I like this. We'll talk. We'll
Okay.
talk about it.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about from your experience, both in biotech and in coaching. What do you think most people misunderstand about health optimization and performance?
Goodness. You don't need to biohack your way out of things, and even the word optimization sometimes I feel like lately has been a little cringy for me, which is interesting because I used to really lean on that word a lot. Like, oh, I just want to optimize things, because I thought it was a fairly gentle word. But we can over optimize ourselves. And I think that is something that we can actually tend to get wrong as humans because again, the pendulum swinging this is not going to go away. This image, it's reality. And we think that we have to be so extreme in our approach when we don't. And that is, I think, the main thing that folks do get wrong, quote unquote, about optimizing, and they think that they need to be perfect and follow everything to a T, especially whatever the current online influencers and biohackers are sharing. But the perfect routine is the one that actually works for them.
That, yeah, true optimization happens when you can find your normal and operate and live in that normal for an extended period of time. So I think that's great. I love that. So tell me a little bit about an example of a client transformation, one that kind of really captures the impact of simplifying and systematizing their health approach.
I have so many examples to choose from, but there was one that came to mind, and she's a full-time lawyer in her early 40s, single mom. She wanted to see some fat loss and definitely some increased energy, especially in the afternoon. She was experiencing that wonderful afternoon energy slump that I think a lot of us are familiar with. And she also wanted to improve her performance, in her day-to-day life as a mom, as a lawyer as well. And initially we focused on the basics just to establish foundational nutrition elements in her life, get to the core of like, hey, let's just the first 4 weeks, let's just understand how to create a balanced meal. That way that can actually fuel you effectively for all of your goals that you have, and then help with the energy slump in the afternoon. Then we progressed through sleep hygiene for her because stress was certainly a factor. And she was living on about 5 to 6 hours of sleep, from what I recall. And then also stress management tools, nervous system regulation tools, just things that she could easily do at her desk or before she was actually going to trial, because she was a trial lawyer as well. And then we worked on increasing just her daily movement because she did great at working out, attending yoga class, things like that, and then doing the strength programming that I did for her, as well as adding in some running. So that was fantastic. But then she would sit a lot during the day and just be at her desk. I'm not kidding you, sometimes for like 4 to 6 hours straight with only bathroom breaks minimally, like maybe twice. And like it was bad. And her fridge was in her office. I mean, so she didn't have far to go to get her lunch. Like it was a worst case scenario. So just trying to increase her daily movement, walking, things like that, as well as just, building these things on top of one another. Okay. So we didn't do all of these things all at once. Like, hey,
Right.
let's do these 10 things. Absolutely not. Like she would have been like, okay, Jen, you're fired. But no, I would have fired myself. But we stair stepped them, we added them on, and it was great because once we laid the foundation, awesome. We made the progressions, and there were only slight changes to the habits every week depending on her success with them. Okay. So then we would figure out what was best for her and dial them up or down. And that way we can build on them only after the basics were successful. So we wanted to be successful, and we also wanted to have her buy in every week. Once she realized, oh, yeah, these small steps do really add up, there was even more buy in from her. And she did. She experienced increased energy. She avoided the afternoon energy slump, which was great. And no more like caffeine splurges basically in the afternoon, which was wonderful. And she saw a massive improvement in her performance in the gym, as well as just her work and work as a mom, and she was able to ultimately, what I remember her saying was, she was able to be so much more present in her day-to-day life and with her kids because of all of those things. And to me, that was really, really damn special. Like, and I still remember when we were doing like our download call, she got really choked up, and I did too. I mean, I'm even getting a little choked up just thinking about it, because she didn't realize how important that was for her as a mom until it happened. And I think that that was really special. But she is hands down one of the best examples of just our work together and what this work can do for you.
That's awesome. What an inspiring story, because I think a lot of moms or dads that are high achievers, that we do struggle with, making sure that we're present with our children and taking that time seriously, and apart from, especially entrepreneurs as well, because you oftentimes are working primarily from home, and so you actually never leave work, which is its own its own set of issues. But like being able to differentiate that and really set that time aside where it's like, okay, putting down work while we have this kid time. So I think that's a really great story, highlighting that you get that kid time back, and also the sleep thing. Cause I know when I was able to manage my lifestyle a little better and cut caffeine out after noon, I saw a huge shift in my sleep quality for sure. So I think that's
Hmm.
that's a great point as well.
Yeah.
So let's now shift a little bit and talk a little bit about the operational side of your business, especially through this kind of pivot. So when you think about delivering this level of personalized coaching at scale, what are some of the operational challenges that you're navigating right now?
Because I can only do so much as a single coach. As a one woman show, I I wear all the hats. I wear the marketing hat. I wear the technological hat, with IT. I'm wearing the coach's hat, obviously, which is the most important role. I'm wearing the podcast producer hat and all of that, right? And it can be a lot. So fortunately I'm organized and I streamline everything. But yeah, it would be capacity.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely have to find things that work, that help you build your systems behind the scenes to help you so that you can do that focused coaching. I think a lot of coaches struggle with that, especially early on before you're able to take the time to build those systems even, or hire someone to help with that. So how are you currently structuring your workflow flows or your systems to support this?
Yeah, it's mostly just streamlining as much as I can and having repeated steps. I have like SOPs and loose SOPs kind of written down, since it's just me. It's nothing formal. But it's like a little checklist system of, okay, once I do this, I need to do XYZ, using templates and zaps basically for repeated tasks, big on templates. And then, having videos too to share what and how I do things with my clients, so they know before we even really hop on a call, for example. And that helps get clarity for them. So any type of repeated questions that I do get, especially from new clients when I am starting with them on their journey together. Great. I remember when I first started coaching, I would have just a list, Q&A. And when I started to see a lot of the questions were repeated, I knew that they needed to be addressed. So yeah, just having standardized approaches to everything really helps. And that's when, having been a trainer as well in corporate, like a corporate trainer rather, that helped because I was the one that was helping with standard operating procedures. So just knowing, I can come from that lens, that technical lens, and apply it to coaching is really cool.
Awesome. So you spoke a little bit about wearing the marketing hat. So, and you have a very diverse audience, from high performing professionals to endurance athletes and even other coaches and practitioners. So how are you thinking about positioning and messaging as you continue to refine your niche?
Yeah, I think my main position will be that I have been where they are. And, I've literally worked in corporate and I've traveled every week, much to like what I said. And many coaches just can't say that they're able to do that or that they even know what that's like. And I truly do know what it's like, especially at a higher level, because I was in management in biotech, even early on in my career, like there's the first couple of years of my career. I was in management, so I was already at a higher level in the corporate setting and managing other people. Managing other people is a whole other beast. So understanding how to manage other people on top of traveling as well, domestically and internationally for a living, all of those things do compound. And just having that understanding and knowing that I can bring it through that coaching lens and through that coaching journey with my clients, I think is so important because life on the road is a very different beast for work versus vacation, like I said, and just knowing that and knowing the difficulties that folks can encounter when they are managing other people in their work is paramount. So that's where I do differentiate myself for sure.
That's great. Yeah, it's so important to have that experience. So
Mhm.
for other founders out there that are listening, especially coaches or practitioners, what's one thing that you've learned about building a business that you wish you had understood earlier?
You have to be patient. You have to be patient and do the things that are not easy. And you have to have a level of faith and trust in yourself that is unmatched in any other facet. And you also have to be willing to address all of your shadows and all of your wounds because as a coach working with a diverse group of people, and I've coached hundreds of people now, over the last almost 10 years at this point, and it's a lot of different personalities, and a lot of those personalities will shine light on your weaknesses, on your wounds, on your shadows, and on your ego. And you have to be willing to accept feedback and criticism with grace and learn from it. And you have to be willing to also accept failures because you're going to have failures. Failures are feedback, though. They help show you what is working and what isn't, especially as a small business owner.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. You have to be your your number one client when it comes to coaching in the business realms. Awesome advice. So as you move forward, what does growth look like for you over the next 12 to 24 months?
Over the next 12 to 24 months, I'm looking at growing my business by about 30%, placing a huge focus on my organization internally, revamping my messaging and niche, of course, like what we've talked about.
Mhm.
And also just getting really clear on my marketing and sales processes, potentially revamping some group courses and opportunities outside of my one on one coaching because of capacity. And just, those things are being developed and are in the ideation phase, which is really exciting. And also along that route, I am placing a huge emphasis on exploring stress management tools and nervous system regulation for those busy professionals and how I want to deliver those things and what are some other things that I want to branch out into, get into some of these apps that are mindfulness and breath work and meditation based, just because I do have that training and
Right.
expertise because I've been meditating and doing breath work ever since I was 15 and I'm 46. I'll be 47 this year. So it's been a hot minute. And
Yeah,
I'm still learning. And yeah, I want to share. I want to share all that I've learned with folks who are in need. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this niche change and just the evolution of it so far.
that's awesome. I love the anytime you can kind of systematize things where it's like, okay, this is a core idea that I need everyone to understand and put that in a video format where it's easy for them to digest on their own time and it doesn't require you to be present for it. I think those are great little tools that you can add to the toolbox that really coincide well with individual coaching. So providing kind of a hybrid program is just a no-brainer to me in these coaching situations because it takes so much off of your plate and then provides so much value to and more impact across the board. So I love that you're moving in that direction. So
And it
let's talk.
works with
Yeah,
schedules. Like that's
it
what I love.
does.
It works with the busy folks that I'm working with. So it works
Yes.
with my schedule, sure, but it works with their schedule even more. So you get
Yeah.
more buy-in. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, they can listen to it on a plane or on a run or at 2 times speed or 3 times speed if they want to,
Yeah,
however
if
they
they're
need
open to
to
it.
digest it, you know? So, yeah, so let's talk about just globally, like the future of health and performance and coaching. What as you look ahead to the future, what especially like for high achieving professionals, shifts do you see coming?
Oh gosh, probably, a good amount of focus on wearable devices and using that data, but using it more effectively. Because I think right now folks are still kind of learning, like once they get a Garmin, like I wear Garmin, not an advertisement. I pay for my Garmin, but if
Me
they're
too.
wearing a Garmin device or an Apple, there you go,
Well,
Garmin
this
girly.
Garmin, yeah.
Yeah, yep, there you go. But I think if, we've seen this influx of folks who are like, okay, great, I'm going to get the Garmin or the Apple Watch or the Aura Ring. And these are all fantastic tools. But sometimes at first, maybe you're guilty of it, raise your hand. If you focused on the data extensively, and it was like the live all be all. Okay, cool. The first thing I do when I wake up is I look at my morning report. What was my sleep like? Ooh, why are we depending on a device to let us know what our sleep was like instead of doing some sort of introspective work?
Mhm.
And I know it's subjective. And believe me, I worked in biotech research for over 12 years. So I was driven by data, right? But the subjective data is going to be just as important, if not more important, than what a device is telling you how well you did something or what were your achievements. Instead, like, hey, how do I feel? Do I feel well rested now once you get over the little initial sleepiness and grogginess, right? As your body switches to the awake mode. But checking in, I think we're going to see that folks are going to get more clear on checking in with themselves and not negating how they feel along their journey to optimal health and wellness. So, yeah, using those data points, but then using them smartly and intelligently, I should say. I'm sure that there's going to be a swing to using AI. We're not there with using AI to like create workouts and things like that. I've kind of tested the feature, and even with like the best of prompts, AI is just not there. But I do see it as being something that is a tool that folks could use for health and performance, over the next few years. Maybe some sort of AI analysis or whatever. We're already seeing it in the health space with mammograms, for example. I had the opportunity to opt in on whether or not I wanted my mammogram to be analyzed by AI. I thought, well, okay, sure. For $50 more, I'm kind of curious about this. And I think that there's going to be tools like that. But again, as long as we're not necessarily depending on it and really using our subjectivity and those subjective tools that make us human, and that is what differentiates us from the bots and things like that. And that I think is where I see things leading. But yeah, I do want to say AI cautiously only because I feel like the trust in like humans is starting to kind of disintegrate just slightly because a lot of people are, having arguments online that I'm seeing like, oh, well, that was created by AI. The XYZ was created by AI. And I think that it's dissolving a little bit of the trust systems that are out there. So we need to be cautious and also optimistically open to what the potentials are, but then also, again, the pendulum swinging, like how do we find what's the middle of the road that works best for your overall health and performance? Hopefully
That's
that
great.
answers the question. I know
It
I kind
did.
of went on a little bit of a tangent, but
No, I think it was beautiful, and I love your point about the devices. I am definitely guilty of the first thing I do is I wanna see what my sleep was, and there have been times where I'm like, "That's not right, I feel great." So
mhm,
I think I
yep.
love the idea of, like, let's scan our own bodies first. Let's see how we feel after we've woken up and we're, doing our thing and getting into the day. It's like, let's check in, like, how do I feel? And then we can compare to the data. But I do think the data has been helpful for me in terms of like assessing lifestyle changes, such
Yes.
as I discovered that if I have one drink of alcohol, my REM sleep is just like cut in half. Like I'm not getting nearly enough REM sleep. And then you like research it and you're like, oh, this is like an actual thing. This is why there's like
Mhm,
this connection with alcohol and Alzheimer's because we're not getting enough REM sleep. It's just messing everything up. So it's like,
mhm,
okay, now I have to make, really smart decisions when it comes to, am I going to have that social drink? And so typically I don't. And,
mhm,
every now and then it's worth it. But it's like having that, knowing that data and like how things affect you or like the caffeine, I think is very important, but we also can't be, ball and chain to the data as well. We have to look to ourselves. And I love that you made that point. I think that's a beautiful point, and I'm gonna do that from now on. I'm gonna check in with myself first, and then I'll talk to you, Garmin.
Exactly, because even for me, what I've noticed, I noticed the same thing, by the way, with alcohol. Oh my goodness, especially as I've gotten older the last few years. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess if I'm going to drink, it needs to be during the day or it needs to literally be before 6 p.m. And a half glass of wine
Yes.
instead of like a full glass. Like I'm starting to realize this. And of course, the easy answer is like, oh, we'll just still drink wine. And I'm thinking, no, I actually enjoy drinking wine. It isn't
Mhm.
something I abuse. I
Yeah.
want it to be a part of my meal, right? But I think the biggest thing is just recognizing, seeing the patterns for sure, but then also figuring out what do you need to do about that, and what are the next steps, small little dial movers. Remember, we're
Right.
doing like small little dial movers, not these on off switches that are extreme. And just recognizing that, yeah, it doesn't have to be these sweeping, massive changes that you have to make, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's so true. I love that, and I actually said the same thing to my daughter's friend about, like, if you're gonna have alcohol, you just have a little bit and during the day, and she's like, "I'm sorry, are you telling me to day drink?" Like, that's not what I
Yes.
said.
Don't misconstrue my words.
That's
It's not
actually not
exactly
what
what
I
I
said.
said. Oh, I love it.
So that's funny that you said that. Okay, one last question before we jump into the lightning round and close out. What do you think people need to start doing differently now to avoid the burnout cycle that we're seeing everywhere?
I'll keep it simple.
Okay.
But I think ultimately they need to say no, learn to say no, learn how to say no if it's not a hell yes. Set boundaries, uphold those boundaries. The lawyer that I mentioned that was a client of mine that I had talked about earlier, gave raves about, she set boundaries. She stopped checking her email after she closed her laptop, which is a big deal. And, when she set those boundaries, that's when she realized, oh, hey, look, I sleep better. Oh, look, I'm less stressed and I don't reach for those cravings that I had at 9 p.m. anymore. And I am present with my kids. I mean, it all impacts so much. I set boundaries with my clients too. I do have a couple clients that are friends and things like that, which I'm always hesitant about, but I will work with friends. But I always set boundaries like, hey, I know you have my cell phone number. Never text me about anything coaching related. And they're like, yeah, of course. That actually makes sense. And I'm like, yeah, you have message access to me in my app. Let's do it. And then they always inevitably say, you know what? I actually need to be better about setting my boundaries because I also say, hey, I'm not checking email during the weekends. I'm trying not to respond during the weekends, just to give myself some break over things. And of course, the exception is if I have a client who's racing something big, then great. Yeah, I will reach out. But if anything, it's an inspiration for my clients to recognize that you don't always have to be on. You don't always have to say yes to everything unless it's a hell yes. You can say no, and no is a complete answer.
That was beautifully said. Just beautifully said. That's gonna make a great clip later.
Yes, Nancy.
Golden nugget of the show. I love it. This is
Perfect.
great. Okay.
Perfect.
All right, we're gonna do a quick lightning round before we close out. So quick questions, quick answers, and there are only 4, and they're easy.
Okay.
So get
I'm ready.
hyped. All right, here we go.
Okay.
Okay.
hmm
What is one myth about health or performance you'd like to eliminate forever?
You don't have to eliminate everything. You don't have to eliminate what you quote unquote think is bad or what social media thinks is bad. If you want the dang Oreo, eat the dang Oreo. What we're trying to not do is eat the entire ream of Oreos, right? So I'm real big on, everything in moderation, even moderation. You need to sometimes have those days when you have those couple of glasses of wine because it's a nice reminder of like, oh, you know what? That does actually make me feel like hell. Maybe I shouldn't have that. Right. But yeah, just nothing extreme. We need to, again, the pendulum, middle of the road,
Love it.
done.
Eat the damn Oreo. Okay.
Yeah. Eat the damn Oreo.
What habit keeps you steady when the stakes are high?
Meditation, 100%. I have got to ground myself once a day at a minimum. And sometimes, if my meditation session that day just wasn't enough to kind of sustain what I needed, for that particular day, given whatever's happening that day, great. I'll go for a dog walk. I'll do some yoga. I'll do a quick stretch session here in my office, whatever it is. But just coming back to center, especially after something that might be a little elevated, or if I had an emotional conversation with a client because they're going through things or experiencing loss in their life and grief, I still need to take care of myself so I can show up for my clients as effectively as possible.
Awesome. What gives you hope right now?
Gosh, I mean, so much because I feel like so many folks are coming together and recognizing that they do need to do some level of work on themselves in order to maybe break cycles, break things that they've learned in their childhood, break things that they've learned in their adulthood or they've experienced in their adulthood. And I have a lot of hope for that, that folks will willingly show up for themselves and shine the light on their shadows and the wounds that they might want to work on, and get really realistic with themselves of what is underneath everything that could be causing a problem for themselves. But also, I think ultimately the other thing that gives me hope is just a level of kindness that I'm seeing with folks. I'm just seeing a lot more kindness in my world, at least in my world. You know, hopefully that is in other people's world as well. And I think kindness and a level of understanding about other people's situations is really important with just how we function as humans.
Yeah, I agree. Last question is, where can our listeners find you and learn more about your program?
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
They can, of course, follow me on Instagram at Shift Human Performance, and they can also go to shifthumanperformance.com, learn about the programs that I offer, as well as some things that are going to be happening. Of course, my website will be revamped over the next several months, so I'm working on that and just adding some more programs that will be, I think, will be the fresh breath of air that folks need in their lives just to steady whatever they need and help them find that groundedness that they might need to help propel them forward.
Awesome. Well, we'll include all of that in the show notes. Jen, this was just a great conversation, especially with the depth of experience that you bring from both the biotech and the coaching side, and really understanding, what it means to be in that high, intense corporate world and having to travel and dealing with all of those things. Bringing that level of awareness and experience to the table is really great. I also really appreciated your focus on simplicity and sustainability because that's what actually creates long-term results for people, and your analogy of the pendulum just, I think, will stick with everyone. So it's wonderful that you brought that to the table. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate having you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Nancy. This was such a great conversation. So I appreciate the time.
Awesome. To everyone listening, if you got value from this episode, make sure you like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. And definitely go check out Jen and Shift Human Performance to learn more about the work she's doing. Until next time, innovation creates possibility, implementation turns it into growth.